Dallas and Golden State played 4 times this year. Dallas was 3-1. Stars missed every single game. The closest thing to the full strength game was on January 5th in Dallas. It was the only time Luka, Steph, and Draymond all played. But obviously, Klay Thompson was out of the picture. Dallas at the time was starting Kleba and Powell, which was a unique thing. And Reggie Bullock was coming off of the bench. Golden State at that point still had Gary Payton II, who is expected to be out for this series. They were playing a lot of Juan Toscano-Anderson and Damian Lee. So again, everything in terms of the regular season matchups has to be taken with a certain amount of a grain of salt, just because of the fact that these teams are completely different versions of themselves at this point. Even just looking a few months ago, so much changes. The playoffs really causes your team to round into the best version of itself, its purest identity. In their individual matchups this year, Steph averaged 20 points per game on 39% from the field, 29% from 3, and 67% from the free throw line. Not great. We're going to get into a little bit about, I think Steph is arguably the biggest swing factor of this series. We'll get into that a little bit later. Luka was awesome, as I expected. There's nobody on Golden State's roster that can realistically guard Luka. Maybe Draymond, but you really need to keep Draymond in help situations, right? So you're not exactly expecting Luka to struggle too much to score individually. Well, he averaged 32 points per game on 48% from the field, 38% from 3, 88% from the line. So almost a 50-40-90 type of mark there from Luka. So again, that's all we have in terms of regular season evidence, but we're going to do our best to try to sift through that and get into some of the details of the series. So you guys know how I like to do it. I like to start on one side of the ball. We're going to start with Dallas on offense. And again, like I mentioned, nobody can guard Luka. The difference between the Phoenix matchup was, Luka didn't have trouble finding guys to attack within Phoenix's scheme, but there were guys on the floor that were difficult to attack. Like DeAndre Ayton was forcing Luka into some pretty tough fall-away jump shots. Now, he's one of the top, 3 or 4 players in the world, so he's going to make them a lot of the time. But that's in terms of a defense, if you can force Luka to take step backs or fall-aways, that's about the best you can do, and DeAndre Ayton did a really nice job of that. And then Mikal Bridges did an amazing job on Luka. And for the most part in the series, Luka did everything he could to avoid trying to shoot against him specifically. Everyone else on that roster, though, he could go at. But the problem is like, whether he was calling for screens or whatever, Mikal would try to fight through the screen, or Luka would be forced to settle for attacking someone like DeAndre Ayton. In this Golden State matchup, they're going to probably start Andrew Wiggins on him. We saw that in the regular season matchups that they had. He has no problem scoring on Andrew Wiggins. He's not going to have any problem scoring on anybody on the roster. Again, Draymond is arguably one of the ideal physical profiles for a player to put on Luka. Really low center of gravity, so he's hard to bump off his spots. Very strong, super long wingspan, quick enough to stay with Luka, and smart enough, right? So in theory, that's smart. Here's the issue. You need Draymond Green in help. That's where he's most valuable to this specific Golden State offense. And if Dallas puts you in a predicament where you have to put Draymond on Luka for the whole series, you're going to get picked apart everywhere else on the floor. And most importantly, if Luka happens to get past Draymond, now your backline defense is significantly worse. So that makes it a lot tougher. And so that'll be one of the dynamics of the series is how is Golden State going to be able to use Draymond? Are they going to have to keep him on Luka, or are they going to be able to keep him in help? My guess is that they'll keep him in help and just try to sacrifice whatever they get in terms of Luka isolations. Now, the issue here specifically for Golden State is obviously matchup attacking takes place all over in the playoffs, but Luka in particular, in my opinion, is the best at it. At least in this field. LeBron typically is the best at this specific skill, but Luka is the best at persistently targeting your worst defenders every time down the floor. Now, Golden State doesn't have any bad defensive players, but they do have small defensive players. And I expect Luka to relentlessly hunt Steph Curry and Jordan Poole. Every time down the floor, he's going to try to get them involved in stuff. And Golden State's going to have a big challenge in attempting to keep those two away from Luka. We talked about this a little bit in last night's show, but the idea of pre-switching or scramming out of switches, essentially doing gimmicky stuff to try to keep Steph out of those situations. But Luka is known to be able to capitalize on those little brief windows that open up as you try to pre-switch or something like that. So Steph and Jordan Poole are going to have a lot on their plate to try to hold their own in isolation matchups against Luka. The other big thing that I expect to become a swing factor in this series is the Kleber-Powell dynamic. We've talked about this a lot with Dallas, but when Dallas plays Kleber, they're a true 5-out team, which is when they have the most space. That's when Luka's at his best. That's when Jalen Brunson's at his best. That's when Spencer Dinwiddie's at his best, right? Dwight Powell, it's more of a 4-out, 1-in thing. They're running a lot of pick and roll. He's rolling to the rim. The spacing gets significantly worse. The problem with running Powell in particular is Draymond Green is one of the best pick and roll big defenders that we have in this entire league, arguably the best. And if you allow Draymond to operate in normal pick and roll defense all series long, you're effectively shaving points. You're playing directly into Golden State's biggest advantage. I shared some clips of this that you'll be able to see on my Twitter feed. If you guys look, just go to my Twitter feed and click on media and scroll down, and you'll see some clips that are demonstrating what I'm talking about. In the possessions where Kleber's on the floor instead of Powell, Draymond is on Kleber and he can't help. Or if he does, he's leaving Kleber open. There were several examples where Dallas Maverick players were driving to the basket and Draymond was kind of helpless. And a lot of times he was too far away to even dig and try to get in there and just reach and recover. And it took Draymond's defensive impact and moved it into a spot on the floor where it has less of an impact on what Golden State is trying to do defensively. So the best strategy, I think, for Dallas is to run 5 out, Kleber primarily, a lot less Dwight Powell, and then trust Luka to relentlessly hunt Steph and Jordan Poole. This is where another series where not having Gary Payton Jr., I think, hurts in a lot of, Gary Payton II. I think that hurts in a lot of different ways, particularly for a guy like Jalen Brunson. You feel a lot more comfortable with a guy like Gary Payton Jr. on Jalen Brunson because he's so good at fighting through screens. It'll make it harder for Gary Payton to guard for Dallas to get Gary Payton off of Jalen Brunson because he can fight through. He's not a good option for Luka. He guarded Luka a little bit this year, and Luka just took him right to the basket. He's too big for him. But he's a very valuable weapon for someone like Brunson, so that's a significant loss. Now, for Golden State, the strategy that I would have is I would do pretty much exactly what Phoenix did for the most part in their home games. Do what you can to make Luka a scorer. Stay home on all of the shooters around the elsewhere on the floor. And if Luka scores 45 every night and he beats you on 15 for 23 shooting, then great. But most likely, if you force him into tough shots all night long, he'll shoot a lower percentage and it'll stagnate everyone else on the floor. That's your best bet, is making Luka a scorer. I think that's Golden State's best chance in this series. So moving over to the other side of the floor. Now we're talking Warriors on offense. So Dallas does a ton of switching. Their normal pick and roll coverage, we broke this down last night. They do kind of like a version of the drop where the big hedges up to the level of the screen and dissuades whatever's happening right after the handoff or right after the screen, but then will recover to the roll man. But if the guard gets caught, then they'll audible to a switch. The guard will peel off of Steph or peel off of Jordan Poole and just run down to the roll man and try to box him out of the lane, right? We talked about that a lot last night. That's their typical pick and roll coverage. But everything else on the floor, they're going to switch. And that's where it's interesting because Golden State runs a lot of guard action, a lot of like Poole screening for Steph, or Poole and Steph both in a screening action with Clay or with Looney or whatever it is. Andrew Wiggins will, roll off of those kinds of things. That's their best opportunity to cause problems for Dallas in their switching attack, is multiple player actions off the ball. I believe I shared a clip of this on my Twitter feed as well that you'll find, but any 3-player action makes it a lot harder to switch because you're not just saying, hey, I'm getting your guy, you're getting my guy. Now it's like, which one of these 2 guys am I supposed to grab? Everyone's supposed to be communicating. It gets a lot more complicated. In the footage that I watched today, there were lots of examples of Golden State running those complicated actions, especially when Steph is involved, because when guys mess up, they want to mess up in the direction of Steph. They want to have they want to have the guy's error on the side of going towards Steph. And you'll see cutters get open and things along those lines on that front. So that Warriors running those complicated actions off the ball, that's the most important thing they can do to make Dallas pay in switching situations. If you get into an isolation contest with Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, you're probably going to lose, especially since Steph hasn't been the same level of isolation player that he was in, even just last year. So ideally you want to supplement that with as much transition opportunity as you can get, especially since, Dallas plays at an extremely slow pace. The more you can get out in transition, the better. The more you can score in off-ball situations, the better, so that you're not stuck in their not stuck in an isolation contest. When you do have to isolate, you have to make the slower-footed Mavericks guard. So Kleba in particular, Luka Doncic in particular. You got to do everything you can to attack them off the dribble. Kleba's actually a pretty good athlete for a big guy. He held his own a lot. Jordan Poole beat him to the basket a few times in the footage that I watched, but he does a decent job of hanging. It's Luka in particular that I think guys like Steph and Jordan Poole can consistently beat to the basket. As I always tell you guys, with switching defenses, the best way to attack them is to not isolate for jump shots, but to isolate for rim pressure. Beat people to the basket. When you beat people to the basket, you force help defenders. When you force help defenders, then you can kick to people that are wide open. Then they either can shoot or they can attack a closeout. That's a more fluid in motion offense than a stagnant, your turn, my turn isolation type of deal. So when Dallas does those things and they get in those switching situations, it's very important for Jordan Poole and Steph to get as much dribble penetration as possible to keep things moving. The last real wrinkle with Golden State on offense is what Dallas is going to do with Draymond, and you can just about guarantee that they're going to ignore Draymond, but every team does. And Golden State does a couple of different things to attack that. Draymond typically will move to the top of the floor, and if you kick it out to him, instead of shooting, he'll just quick run over to the nearest guard, do a dribble handoff, because again, if you set a good screen on a dribble handoff and you hit the guy, there's no help there because no one's guarding Draymond, right? So that's another way to get open looks. But even that, I don't think is enough. I think it's going to be very important for Draymond to look to score. When he catches the ball at the top of the key when he's wide open, barrel down the lane if you have to. I would shoot the threes to save your legs, but barrel down the lane if you have to and try to draw help there. But the big one is in short roll situations. Dallas did a lot of trapping of Steph in pick and roll. Big shock, everyone does. When they trap Steph in pick and roll and Draymond's rolling down the lane, it's so important for him to look to score. The floater, the layup, anything in the lane, because if you're a threat there, the defense will collapse on you. That's when he can kick to great shooters around the floor. If he doesn't look to score there, no one will collapse on him, and then you get caught in no man's land. That indecisiveness that Draymond occasionally has there, he's been pretty good about it of late, but that's going to be very important in this series for him to stay a threat. So, as far as picking this series, I think that Dallas's shot quality in the half court is going to be better. I believe so because I think Luka is less solvable. Because of the fact that Steph is not as aggressive trying to score the basketball as he used to be, particularly in isolation situations, I feel as though Luka is going to, Golden State does not have an answer for Luka. In isolation situations, he's going to get whatever he wants. And if you make him a scorer, it might work if he doesn't shoot well, but if he shoots well, you're just going to lose. And then if you send help, he's just going to spray around his shooters all night long. Dallas is an extremely disciplined defense, and over the course of each of these last couple series, they've got stronger defensively, especially in that Phoenix series, as you saw. They are going to learn to, over the course of the series, be in the right spots for a lot of the cutting, the actions and the cutting and the things that Golden State does off the ball. So I am picking Dallas in 6. I believe they will close out this series at home in Game 6. However, the biggest swing factor of this series, Golden State's biggest chance, is the return of old Steph. Dallas is going to try to turn him into a scorer as well, particularly in on-ball situations. If Steph is aggressive and looks to punish mismatches, particularly going to the rim, Golden State has a chance, especially with home court advantage. Not counting them out, but I believe that Dallas has more cards in the deck to target this version of Steph who did not play well in the last round offensively, played amazingly at the end of games, was savvy veteran, did all the right things to close the deal, which is why he's such a great player. But at this point in his career, he's going to be asked to do more offensively as a scorer in this series. And if he doesn't, I don't think they can win. And so I'm picking Dallas in 6, but Golden State's chance is the Steph from last year making his sighting. Averaging around 30 points, true shooting percentage around 60%. That's Golden State's best chance to get it done.